more streaming than younger people who I feel are hankering more after records.
I've never owned a single record in my life.
Oh,
so
what the? What the hell?
Yeah, I can't possibly comment.
You've never owned a single record in your life?
I haven't.
So you were listening to your parents' records, and then...
I had a big CD collection.
Devore Fidelity, the show partner of Not an Audiophile, the podcast. Devore Fidelity has become one of the most acclaimed high-end companies in the world, and having heard the loudspeakers many times, I know why. They're all still handcrafted in Brooklyn, New York. We love how this iconic brand captures the excitement and breadth of the sound. Nothing brings you closer to the music than Devore Fidelity. For a retailer near you, visit devorefidelity.com. And we are back. Not an Audiophile, the podcast, episode 54, season 3, fresh back from the Sydney HiFi show with a cold. Not true. Didn't get it at the show, wasn't enough people there. Did shoot a video though, and that's up on the YouTube channel. So speaking of the YouTube channel, you should go there and have a look. You should comment on the Sydney show if you went, or if you didn't go and you've seen the video and you have thoughts. The video, by the way, is not in any way not representative of the show, except for one room, Bill McLean's Magnaplaner room, which sounded magnificent, but he hid in the cellar, through a tunnel downstairs, and then had to get into a lift, and I missed it with the video, but I did get to listen to it later, and that system sounded great. So sorry, Bill, and sorry to viewers, but yeah, it was a pair of Magnaplaners in a room with some very nice equipment, but you had to be there if you wanted to hear how it sounded. Make comments on the video if you were there and you have thoughts on that show, whether you thought it was magnificent or an embarrassment, please. We certainly have thoughts, and in 2 weeks' time we will be discussing that, and that will be 2 days before Vienna, which is what we're really interested in, getting very excited at this point. We'll be there shooting multiple videos, interviews, etc., and if you want to see what the new biggest high-end hi-fi show in the world looks like, you will need to subscribe at Not an Audiophile podcast YouTube channel, and you'll get them up from day one onwards. New website, yeah, wow. So the website was blown up by some hackers. Nothing to do with us. Our hosting company let them in, said, do what you want, make sure you get rid of everything, and they did just that. As it turns out, there were backups, but it took them nearly 2 weeks to sort it out. In the meantime, we'd built a whole new website, and it's great. Go and have a look at it, notanaudiophile.com. It's twice the website there was before. Similar content, although fresher, crisper, better, stronger, much better layout. Looks like it was built this year, not in the early 90s, before the internet was even invented, apparently. So yeah, please go and have a look at that. I think that covers it. Very excited about today's interview with Srajan from Six Moons and Edgar from SoundStage Australia. It's a great old story. It does go on a bit, but well worth a listen. Enjoy it. And just on the subject of Edgar, yes, Edgar will be and myself will be discussing the Vienna show post Vienna, and that will be the next episode after the next episode, if you know what I mean. So in 2 weeks' time, Sydney show's discussion, and then 2 weeks after that, Vienna. Sounds pretty good to me. March Audio. March Audio is a proud episode sponsor of the Not an Audiophile podcast. With a mission to provide superb technical performance and exceptional sound at modest prices, Alan March has designed a range of power amplifiers, a preamplifier, and a selection of stunning loudspeakers that you should check out now at marchaudio.com. Hey, Srajan, welcome to Not an Audiophile. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. And Edgar Kramer is also present. Edgar's, yes, backing up the Australian contingent from the Blue Mountains. How are you today, Edgar?
I'm very well, thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming, making your time available. Your very precious time, your reviewing time. Your backdrop is somewhat more impressive than mine. but we're not videoing it, so it doesn't matter. Hey,
That's right.
hey, Srajan, the weather there this morning is, of course, can you tell yet? Has the sun even come up?
Sun came up and now it's hidden behind clouds, which tends to be typical for this area.
That's much as I expected, although it's very similar here, or at least it was during the day. Hey, we've got a subject mapped out for this wonderful occasion, and in fact it was your idea, Srajan, that we should discuss, quite rightfully I think, things that we wish we had known about hi-fi and audio in general perhaps at the beginning, rather than perhaps learning, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years later. Is there anything in particular, either of you, and I'm going to say, Srajan, you can go first because you had the idea, right? So I got a feeling you've got something bottled up that you want to blurt out.
All right. Well, thanks. I will actually start with the question for all of us because I'm very curious about our respective answers.
Sure.
And that is, am I correct to say that before any of us, 20, 30, 40, perhaps even longer, more years ago, when we started out on this audiophile or hi-fi journey, that at that point, all we were really doing was listening to tunes, completely unconcerned with sound quality. And if so, if the equipment came after and the music came first, would we say, in retrospect, that our enjoyment today is the same, less, more, or simply different than it was when we started out? I'm very curious about how the two of you feel, because like me, the two of you have been on this audiophile adventure for decades now.
Sure. Well,
Andrew, do you want me to go, or do you want me to
well,
go first?
I think you can go, Edgar. I think it's a fantastic question. The way it's, I mean, thanks, Srajan. That's very, it's an interesting way to ask it. And yes, Edgar, you should go first as I ponder it.
Okay, you'll have more time to think. Yeah, I think music came first, of course, for me, and at a very young age, probably around 11 or 12 or so before my teens even.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get older and as you enjoy music more and more, you start wanting to experience music with a higher level of fidelity, I think. And then you you don't necessarily get sidetracked, but it's a fork on the road, and which
Yes.
follows on a parallel basis, right? So you continue the journey of enjoying music, and then you also start expanding and getting more experience on the side of the equipment and how those two join together. But I think that's very interesting what you asked for, John, because I think I'm on the third option that you presented, which was that I listen to music in a different way now. So not necessarily enjoying it either less or more, but in a different way. And so you come, depending on the engagement at the time of listening to a track or an album or an artist, I tend to go in and out of engagement levels.
Okay.
So I could be, for one track, totally captivated, and in another track, I'm beginning to think, oh, okay, I wonder whether I can get a little bit more fidelity to this particular track to get that engagement that I'm actually looking for. So yeah, that's probably my answer. That it's changed. I think it's changed in general. Yeah.
How does that answer affect you, Srajan? Was it kind of what you were looking for?
To be honest, I didn't have any particular expectations, but if I may, Edgar, if I may ask something in response to what you just said, and that is that if I understood this correctly, you now find yourself on occasion asking or desiring more of your equipment which means that the part in you that is engaged, the experiencer, you, is doing less, and you expect more of the equipment to compensate. Because if you were doing it all, like in the days before you had fancy equipment, the equipment contributed very little, and your imagination or your participation had to basically do the lot, correct?
Sure, yeah.
So do you find that balance has now shifted, or at least occasionally does shift?
I think the word there is occasionally, yeah. I mean, you're not in a, personally, I'm not in a constant state of mind where I'm always thinking this way and then I'm always thinking that way and I'm changing between the two. So it's more, sometimes I think that way and sometimes I don't think that way. And, there's so many factors. What is it? What affects you? Is it the actual music you're listening to? Is it how you feel on the day? Is it that you've got a pain on the foot? Is it that you've had a heavy breakfast? Is it, all those sorts of things?
Heavy breakfast?
Just a complex.
No one wants that.
Yeah, in other words, it's a complex grouping of stimulus from different areas, including the music that you're listening to and including what the system is, or how you're engaging with the system and the music. Yeah.
But is it then fair to say that if our journey starts out with just music, and then our interest in also the sound part of the music starts to grow, that in a way our experience becomes more complex?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Where before you were just looking for the stimulus that you got from the music, now you're becoming engaged with the music, but you're also thinking about how to change that, or how have you reached this point at the moment? Is it the system? Is it the music that's engaging you? What is it? Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question.
You did.
Okay.
I think there's a little bit of, I always wonder about, I think we all agree that most very good musicians tend not to have amazing stereo systems. Not always, but in many cases. And I always feel that they don't have a problem putting up with a mediocre system because they're listening to the music and they're listening to it, well, really only, much as you were driving at perhaps Srajan as a beginner before you've discovered fancy equipment. And they're listening to it in a very different way than the so-called audiophile. And I don't know what that is. I mean, I always feel it's listening more to the actual structure of the music, the melody, the rhythm, what have you, rather than the sound of the music, perhaps. Is there something in that?
Mm-hmm. How would you describe it for yourself?
Well,
the beginning and where you are now.
Well, it's been a while. Much as Edgar started very young. I don't honestly know what age, but I'm going to say 8 or 10 or something. And we had a particularly awful family stereo, but I guess at least we had one, right? And there was, of course, a good solid collection of my parents' music, which was horrific, really. I mean, Engelbert Humperdinck or whatever, and Harry Seacombe and just a collection of, obviously music of the era, Seekers perhaps, which was Australians will know is, was quite a big deal in this country in the 60s, although I'm talking early 70s. There was no modern music, no pop music, no, naughty rock and roll in our house, no Beatles, which is kind of a shame. So I was not exposed to the Beatles at an early age. But what happened is very quickly, for whatever reason, I thought this stereo sounds bad. Dual cone, very flimsy paper cone speakers. It was a tube radiogram sort of thing, it was a national, as in modern day Panasonic. It was not a piece of junk, but it was, a Garrard record changer, stack 5 or 6 records up and they go clunkety clunk and smash into each other. Probably not doing them a great world of good. But yeah, I felt the sound was bad. And I was kind of also exposed to my parents' friend who was was a mechanical engineer, and he had a fondness for hi-fi. There was a big pair of home-built, some kind of transmission line speakers with a upward-facing bass mid, I think, some kind of odd sort of thing, which I've never to this day have ever seen anywhere else, with a home-built tube amp and a home-built turntable. I suppose the mechanical engineering thing was part of that equation and how it got together, and might have been like a Heathkit amplifier or something. And now it sounded a whole lot better. So that was the comparison, and I'm like, no doubt to my parents, I said, come on, let's get something. We can do better than this. But apparently we couldn't. And so a whole pile of money was spent on a colour TV instead. So, but fast forwarding from there, I very quickly fell into hi-fi when we moved state. Discovered hi-fi at a local home furniture show where the local hi-fi dealer had set up a display, and I knew pretty much straight away this was for me. I visited his store probably the next day, was exposed to proper hi-fi, and here we are. And that was, crikey, that was, late 70s. So it's nearly 50 years that I've been listening to decent equipment. And to sort of go down the road that Edgar did with the answer, I would say I have had a difficult relationship with high-fidelity equipment in some ways where, there are those days where, in fact, I was listening to something yesterday evening, yesterday afternoon actually, and there was just too much ambient noise. I live in a city, and a noisy part of the city, and I'm like, no, I'm going to put this unenjoyable sound down to too much ambient noise, and I'm going to switch it off and listen to it later, and it sounded great. So I guess it was a noise thing, or was it my mood, attitude, what have you? But I will say that whole lack of enjoyment of your system at sometimes goes down as you get a better system. There's no doubt about it. And I guess a better system is one that suits your taste better, more than necessarily being ultimately better. And I did have another thought when you mentioned the question, Srajan, about the, the search I went on with hi-fi specifically was I found myself very sensitive to poor quality mid-range. So if you think about the late 70s, a lot of loudspeakers were quite coloured, a bit screechy in the mid-range, particularly less affordable ones, and I found that to be unpleasant, and that's when my love for the LS35A kind of took off once I discovered those. And at the time, that was, I think, the most uncoloured, even if it is a bit coloured, we think these days. At the time, it was probably the least coloured loudspeaker, around, frankly, I think. At an affordable cost. They were about 1,000 Australian dollars a pair, and they didn't play loud enough, and they didn't have enough bass, so I didn't buy them. But I hankered after them, or something, of that purity in the mid. And here we are. I've been on that quest for some years now. So, Srajan,
we all have.
Well, yeah, and look, I think Edgar and myself, we know we're quite different in our kind of taste in equipment. I think Edgar loves a fairly what's the word? I hesitate to use the word high end, and Edgar's going to deny that this is the case. But I feel like you do appreciate the finer things more than I do in some ways. In the, a hefty amplifier of exceptional quality, and obviously you have your Wilson loudspeakers. Would I ever buy Wilsons? No, I would not. I would not invest that amount of money. So we're different in that area. But at the same time, I think we do hanker both after great fidelity and what we enjoy, but I'm willing to spend less money to obtain that. I think is I really love value for money equipment.
I'm open-minded to whatever. I think. There's some audio that is, you're talking, for example, DACs. Anywhere between $500 and $2,000, incredible sounding components.
Yeah, but your total DAC is really, really good.
Sure, it is. It is. But that's You can get as much enjoyment in music from a $5,000 system as you can from a $500,000 system. And it brings me back to something that you
Yes.
mentioned, actually, Andrew, that you mentioned how the music that you had access to when you were young at home from your parents' collection was lackluster. And I think I was very, very, very lucky and I can't associate this music that I discovered in my parents' collection with my parents. They don't tie in. But like there was Led Zeppelin and the Doors.
Wow, really?
And there is no way my parents were into that, but yet they had it there,
That's was that peer pressure that made them?
That's right. And I actually wrote this as part of my bio when I first started writing for you, Srajan, for 6 months. I was literally almost in tears as a 11 or 12-year-old. Listen to Light My Fire from the Doors and the Immigrant Song from Led Zeppelin. And these were singles that they had at that time.
Okay, wow.
And so that's, I just wanted to pick up on that. I guess I was lucky that way, because that shaped my music taste. And, after that, I've always been into sort of propulsive rock and punk and that kind of music, although I'm obviously open to all sorts of genres, but yeah. How about you, Srajan?
So, news update, Mike Lenehan's latest design is in fact back in production, superbly engineered and built with the finest materials and components by Lenehan Brothers. Visit lenehanbrothers.com.au for all of the information.
Well, I'll keep it brief because we want to get to sort of the meat of it, of this session. But I grew up in a musician's household, and I started to learn the classical clarinet before I even went to school. And I pursued a career as a musician, so went to the conservatory.
Okay.
Won national competitions in Germany, played in chamber music ensembles, played in orchestras, played as a soloist. And there was nice equipment in our home. Like I remember my dad having a set of like small Dynaudio bookshelves, one of those massive Yamaha receivers of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
And he eventually had he started out with a Tandberg open reel and then upgraded to a Revox. And the dual turntable, I think, was much simpler. But what he asked my mom to do every day was to record off the radio classical programs that included clarinet.
Okay.
So in those days, you had newspapers with a complete listing of every radio station and what they would play when. And so he had it like underlined what he was into. And dutifully, my mother had to be there at 3:00 in 10 minutes and hit the record button. And so they developed a library of clarinet-based repertoire. And so I grew up with some sound in the family, but it was not really until my mid to late 20s that I had my first stereo. Meanwhile, I had listened to and played music for much, much longer. And I do remember incidents like driving an old jalopy car with a car stereo.
Yeah.
Listening to radio and listening to a song. And the song was coming in and out of reception. And I would actually pull over to the side of the road while the reception was good, waiting for the announcer to tell me what song it was. I mean, that's how much I was into the music, and sound didn't matter whatsoever.
Yes.
Like zero. Bupkes.
Yeah.
And I will confirm what you said earlier, in that my brother and my sister both play French horn in German orchestras. My sister's at the Wiesbaden States Opera. My brother's at the Hamburg Symphony. And they have decent, but not extraordinary HiFis.
Yes.
Don't really care about having anything better. And if you were to present them with something superior, they would be able to hear it. And then they would say, what I have is good enough for me. It doesn't really make enough of a difference for me to want this.
Yes.
And my assumption has always been that musicians participate a lot more with their imagination and then their emotions, and they don't need the hi-fi to render them a pointillist precision image
Yes.
of the thing. Just the bare outline, like a sketch, will suffice, and then their imagination fills in the rest.
Yeah.
And I have a sense that at least for some audiophiles that are on the equipment improving journey, they lose that capacity to engage with the music, and they expect more and more of the equipment. And the way that I sort of reference that is like this do-me attitude, which I remember from the days when I was a massage therapist. And my favorite clients were the ones that took care of themselves, good diet, exercise, etc. And they might have just injured themselves, or they have a pain and they want me to help them in their healing process, versus the overweight guy that had a 10-course meal the evening prior, and now he heaves himself on my massage table and basically says, do me, fix it. But he doesn't take any responsibility for himself, right? And so this do-me attitude, I think that some audiophiles develop towards their equipment. Now, if I speak for myself and I ask myself, do I enjoy listening to music now more than when I first started out? Or is it different? I can definitely say that what I have lost is my innocence.
Yeah.
Which wasn't concerned about the sound whatsoever. It
Yes.
was not like a separate entity. It was just like one thing. And in between, when I started to work in a hi-fi retail shop, and Stereophile was something I read like religiously every month, I started to become introduced to certain terms, like sound staging and imaging and truth of timbre and this and that.
Yes.
And then I would ask myself, well, do I hear any of this? And if not, I want to.
Yeah, okay.
And that meant that I now had to start listening more analytically. I was listening for things.
Yes.
Rather than listening to things.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yes.
Right? And I think that whole journey into fancy equipment that would deliver some of those qualities, that took me away from the pure sort of innocent or maybe naive enjoyment that I started out with. And like Edgar said before, I now sometimes notice myself starting out really being engaged. And then if for some reason I find an issue with the sound, which could be just me, or it could be that my system that particular day just doesn't do it for me, I'll sort of get out of enjoyment. And I might go to a different track. And if that don't do it for me either, I may just turn the system off entirely.
Mm.
And I have a feeling that that sort of not being engaged happened to me a lot less way, way, way back when.
Yeah.
I think you made some interesting points that actually, Andrew, tie in with the topic that we wanted to talk about. So we're not too far off, right?
No. We're zoning in. Yeah.
Yeah, we're zoning in. There's an interesting thing that Srajan said, that you said, Srajan, that there's the chasm between live music and reproduced music, no matter how high-end your system is so large that musicians basically are saying, this is, it doesn't really matter.
Don't bother.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
there's nothing that can substitute the sound of live music and the engagement of live music and the involvement. So bring me a $500 system or bring me a $500,000 system. The chasm's still there. Maybe it's less wide, but and less deep, but it's still there and it's still large. So I guess and it ties into something that we lost. Again, the loss of innocence. I get a great point that you brought up, Srajan. And you wish that you'd know back then that if you got into this in a very serious way, like we have, you'd lose that innocence. You'd lose that. But yeah.
I think where you go, Srajan.
No, I just wanted to compliment you on having made a really brilliant point about musicians not having the need, desire, or even notion that playback should be equivalent to the life experience. They know it's impossible, so they don't even try.
Yeah, yeah.
And because they don't try, they have it much easier, because then a little table radio will do the job.
Yes.
And it'll give you the satisfaction.
Yeah.
You're not constantly frustrated by the fact, oh, this isn't sounding as good as I'd like it to. No, it's not about that. So yeah.
Andrew?
I've got thoughts. One is that I think it's a little bit to do with the kind of music that you're listening to. So, if you think about, and the chasm for me is when you flip into what we now kind of hear and regard as, well, what I've always called audiophile music, right? So just stuff that's kind of sounds or feels like it's been engineered, written, played, designed, if you like, to create an interesting and exciting soundscape for people with decent audio systems, perhaps more than being certainly a catchy piece of music or an enjoyable piece of music. And we could be unpleasant and name a number of obvious audiophile tracks that we all probably hate. And I don't even mean the ones that are... I don't even mean Boz Scaggs as an example, because that's not an audiophile track. It's just a beautifully engineered album that's got the shit played out of it, and no one wants to hear it ever again, if we're talking about the Dig album. Because actually there's some good music on that album, but it's been ruined by overplayment at shows and stores, I guess. It's more that... Okay, here's the thing. So do you listen to the Boz Scaggs album because the music, the rhythm, the melody, it's enjoyable, it moves you emotionally, or is it because you're listening for just that incredible fidelity and that slickness of production, which it definitely has, in my opinion? It makes very ordinary systems sound kind of incredible, of course. It gives them a step up. Not ordinary, just good systems, gives them a step up. So if I find myself... if I was to award points for excitement when listening to music, it would be maybe 5 of the points would be for the quality of the music, the excitement. Just stuff that you know, or just stuff that moves you and connects to you. But then the other 5 out of 10 points could be allocated in various ways. In some ways for just how good the system, portrays some particular subtlety that maybe is really your thing. And then there might be other points out of the 5 that are awarded for other aspects of that. And so overall, the excitement and how much you're enjoying the performance of this stereo with that music today will vary depending on just how much the music pushes those various buttons. That's how it is for me. So, for instance, in the very rare occasion that I hear something at a high-end audio show that's exceptional, and you don't hear it much, I think we can all agree, but there is a particular system I have in mind that it's been at Munich the last couple of years, giant horns from Acapella, and I could sit there and listen to that for a long time because it's transfixing. It's such a different presentation and an exciting presentation and of course, and the tracks that I remember hearing on it was music that I enjoy also just for the music. So there was a Pink Floyd track, yes, I know, played to death as well, but it was The Wall, not Dark Side of the Moon, and I just never, and it's a track that no one really plays off that album. It's not one of the, well, maybe it is. I think it was Brick in the Wall Part 1, but the point is it doesn't get the commercial play of the second one, and it just was so amazingly different that I found that exciting, and I think it's because it was probably 9.5 points out of the available 10, because you got 5 for enjoying the music, and then you got 4.5 for all of the other technical aspects. And so I guess that's how I travel through this. But yeah, I completely agree with both of you, is that, life would be simpler with more basic equipment and no desire for improved fidelity. But I did have that desire very early, and I'm stuck with it. So, and I can't listen to music enjoyably on a terrible stereo. I'm sorry, I really can't. If there's a rattle in one speaker and there's, it's out of balance and it's a bit dirty sounding or very dirty sounding, I can turn it off no matter how good the music is, I have to say.
But if you had the same rattling speaker when you're a teenager and you're listening to a track that you really like, would you even pick up the fact that it's rattling? Would you filter that out and not even care? I don't give a shit what's wrong with this speaker. I'm just loving this music. So do you think that's...
I think I can, because I just recently sold a car that they tried to fix the right-hand door speaker and stop it from rattling for the 6 years that I owned the car, or the 5 years it was under warranty. Now, they say they've tried all sorts of things to get rid of that rattle. I don't think they ever did anything, frankly. But the point is, yes, I did. When that rattle rattled and I was listening to great music, yeah, I listened past it. I don't know what that says about me. But, hey, there was only one stereo in the car and I was stuck with it, right? So I suppose I could have improved it. But, you know, I've kind of grown out of car stereo, I guess. But it was basically a good sounding system, but it had this persistent rattle, either a bit of tin in the door or the driver itself, and it was quite intermittent, made it hard to fix. And when it did play up, yeah, I did put up with it. But interestingly, as a kid, I don't think I did, because I think that's what caused me to get into, trying to build an improved speaker or fixing the existing one. That was, you say, no, Edgar, I don't think I did want to put up with it. I still enjoyed the music, though. Like, I would have tuned it out if it was the only choice I had, I guess. But I had other choices, and I either created them or fixed them or what have you. So, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
I think the point here is all three of us are quite different in a way. I'm interested, Srajan, with your musician background and your siblings to some degree agreeing with my connotation, but you are the exception that I also alluded to, where you've been drawn into the dark side of chasing either Nirvana or a dragon. Thoughts?
Well, maybe I'm going to steer the conversation to the subject of what do I wish I had known on the quote-unquote audiophile or equipment journey when I started out, that it took me more than 30 years to realize. And it would have simplified if I had known some of that stuff way, way earlier.
Stereonet.com. Forums, classifieds, news and reviews, opinion pieces. Mark Rushton has built one hell of a website, stereonet.com. Take a look today. So we're here with Srajan and Edgar. Srajan from Six Moons, of course. I think Srajan's had that website. You started it, I believe, Srajan.
Yes, in June of 2002.
Wow, so some considerable time ago. And Edgar, of course, you are in the website business as well with SoundStage Australia.
And I started that in 2017.
I was going to say a dozen years, but it's not that long. But you've been writing HiFi reviews for so long, I've lost track of where you were doing it and why. Well, we know why.
Yes, and in fact, I started off writing HiFi reviews for Srajan for 6 Moons.
What?
Well, wait a minute. You did prior to that in print magazines, didn't you?
Sorry, true. I did write some reviews for the Audiophile Society of New South Wales, which was it was really a club with a fancy name, and so I wrote the newsletter for that, and I wrote some reviews for that. But I started off writing for Srajan, and soon after I got the a position as editor on one of the print magazines here in Australia. I was actually reviews editor for Australian HiFi and for Sound and Image magazines for one of the major publishers here in Australia, print, and I was there for well over 10 years, I think. 10 years. And
so 2017. 2017 kind of signifies the end of print to some degree, doesn't it?
For me at least, yes.
Yeah, for you. All right. Srajan, you, at the end of the last segment, you mentioned you were going to launch into your thoughts on what you wish you had known at the start. Fire away, sir.
Okay, so there are 3 points, but they're all interconnected. And they would be HiFi.
Mm-hmm.
They would be near field,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be active cardioid bass.
Wow, okay.
So to start with HiFi, which I got into a lot later than speakerphi, in a serious way, I mean, I think that any budding audiophile or somebody interested in music playback in the home via equipment, as a matter of education and sensitizing our hearing, really should either own or have access to a good HiFi system. Why do I say that? Because the only way to know what is quote unquote on our CDs or LPs or in our digital files, as close as we can possibly get, is to eliminate the room with all of its influences on the sound, which is something that headphones do. They cut out the room. They also eliminate ambient noise, not necessarily down to zero, but they certainly reduce it. Mm-hmm. They reduce distance losses, which means that with less SPL, with less sound pressure, we enjoy a deeper look down into the fine details because we lose less. We have more linearity. We usually have more bandwidth. I mean, a good headphone can go down to 25 hertz without room issues. Mm-hmm. And we can actually understand and know what our favorite music sounds like when the room is not messing it all up. And armed with that education and that expectation relative to what our tunes should sound like, if we now start to pursue a speaker system, we will very quickly conclude that it's not as easy as we thought if we have the ambition to have the speaker system quality on the level with the headphone system quality. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. I wish I had known that, because that would have avoided a whole lot of detours. Second, the near field. This is directly related to headphone listening. Yeah. Because the near field, the way that I describe it, would be speakers within 1 meter or less from where I'm sitting. Okay. And that tends to practically be a desktop. Doesn't have to be, however. And it is very similar to a recording engineer with his console and the speakers on the console. Mm-hmm. You basically can reach out your straight arms and you can probably touch the speakers. Yep. Again, if the speakers are that close and they're perfectly towed in and they're a decent distance away from the wall, we eliminate most of the room's influence. Again, we don't have to play very loud because we don't lose a whole lot of sound bouncing all over and taking time to reach our ears. And with smaller speakers and much less power in the amplifier and less sophisticated electronics, we can make better sound in the near field than we can in the mid or far field, the classic stereo triangle in a larger room with large floor standing speakers. So if one starts out, if one has the ambition or idea to sort of mimic HiFi, but one wants to get the sound out from inside the skull cave, out in front of one. Yeah. Near field is a very good solution because it doesn't take a whole lot of money. It's smaller, so it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. One can start out in a small room, in an office, in a nook or a cranny, and one doesn't sort of take over the living room, which tends for most people to be a shared use room. The family is there, the HiFi is there, guests are there. It has to serve more than one function. So that's my second point. I wish I had known that. And the third point relates back to the first point, which is what should bass actually sound like? And what is the bass that's recorded rather than what my room makes of it?
Sure. Yep.
And the headphones that sort of reset my expectations about, maybe it's now 6 or 7 years ago, when the RAL requisite true ribbon headphones that look like an AKG 1000 of yore, because it's basically an open baffle without an ear cup, and they don't touch the ears, and you can actually sort of rotate them out. What those ribbons did relative to my then speaker-based systems was so different that ever since then, I've tried to get my speaker systems to sort of approach. They'll never equal it, but to approach that. And what do I mean? The word pear-shaped. Most speaker systems in a room sound pear-shaped. What do I mean? I mean that from the mid-range into the treble, everything is more or less linear. And the further we go down in frequency, the fatter, slower, woolier, more resonant and ringy it gets. Because now the sound radiates omni.
Yes.
It's bouncing off all of our surfaces, which is at the minimum 6. 4 walls, floor, and ceiling, but plus then there's furnishings in the room. So the bass frequencies bounce off it all. They arrive at our ear late, and whatever is late, by definition, is slow. It's not that slow bass is because the woofers are too slow.
Yeah, indeed.
No, it's because the sound takes longer to reach our ears than the more direct sound of the higher frequencies. And those RAL ribbon headphones did not do that. And they did bass down to 30 hertz. And now I thought to myself, well, without room treatments, without bass traps and absorbers, which have to be enormous if they are passive to work in a room, how can I approach that kind of bass that is now no longer pear-shaped, where the bottom has a different texture, it's like looser and ringier, and it gets firmer and more defined the higher up in frequency I go. How can I replicate that? And my first sort of proof of how to do that was the Key 3. Now, the Key 3 is an active speaker that's using side-firing and rear-firing woofers, not for more bass, but via strategic cancellation to force the radiation of that speaker to be cardioid, which basically means heart-shaped.
Yes.
So rather than omni, most of that speaker's bass radiates to the front. What goes out to the side cancels out, so the side walls disappear as reflective surfaces, and what radiates back, which would be the front wall, the wall that we are looking at when we are listening, that is very much reduced as well. With that speaker, you could actually play very bass-heavy music, park yourself in one of the front corners behind the speaker, and basically hear no bass. And suddenly that whole pear-shaped thing had become much more continuous. The textures from the treble to the mid-range to the bass were more or less the same, just like on headphones. Now, I didn't want an active speaker, because as a reviewer, I need to be able to change amplifiers and preamps. I need a passive speaker. Then I discovered RIPOL bass. RIPOL is an acronym that is short for Axel Ritthaler Dipole. Ritthaler Dipole RIPOL. What is it? It's secret linkwidths. That's something very similar.
Yes.
It's basically a folded open baffle wherein two woofers face to face are loaded into a slot that fires out the front. So the front radiation of those woofers fires at us. Then the rear radiation goes out 2 rear slots, which means that's out of phase with the front radiation, just like a dipole, which means that anything that goes to the sides, sidewall left, sidewall right, which is like one of our room modes, that resonance is completely canceled. There is no output to the sides. And the output towards the front wall is less than what goes towards the listener. So even there is less reflective garbage. It's basically directional bass. It's very similar to the Key 3, but it's purely passive. There's no DSP. There's no active bass. And the thing that I added on top of that are 2 active bass traps from a Swiss pro audio company called PSI Audio. And they have an active bass trap trap that they developed with two Swiss universities. Very brainy stuff that goes completely over my head. But the end result is something that is about 30 centimeters in diameter. It's a column, 30 inches in centimeters in diameter, and probably about, I'd say, 90 to 100 centimeters tall. It looks like a plant stand, and it comes in black or in white. And you plug that into wall power, and that's all you do.
Yeah, okay.
There's a microphone in there. There's two drivers in there. It's not out-of-phase cancellation. It works differently. What these active small bass traps do is they work below 150 hertz, and they behave as though wherever you place them, you had the 1 by 1 meter hole in the wall. So instead of that area of the room pressurizing where the bass waves are building up, you put a hole. So you depressurize. And rather than reflecting back, the bass is being trapped. So it has the same effect as traditional classic bass traps, but it is much, much smaller. Two of those in the front corners, a cardioid dual 15-inch subwoofer in the middle between the speakers, with a active crossover set to 100 hertz. Now I don't need big speakers because I would castrate them below 100 hertz. Why I pay for it and then not use it? Yeah. So now basically I can end up with high quality monitors that only need to go to about 60 hertz because I'm going to roll them out at 100 hertz fourth order anyways. And I have active directional bass that goes down to 25 hertz, no problem. I have a simpler system. I have bandwidths like the RAL ribbons on my ear, and I have the same kind of textual continuity from the bottom to the top. So my takeaway is that if I want to exceed the near field, I want a bigger soundstage, I want more powerful low frequencies that I can actually feel on my skin, like I can in a live setting.
Yes.
Active directional bass, and active means the bass is adjustable. So I can change the relative balance based on my room and my hearing preference. A set of small monitors, left and right, and whatever electronics I need to drive them. That to me has sort of become the quote-unquote holy grail of home-based listening, something that took me the last 6 or 7 years to figure out how to do as a result of wanting to replicate that ribbon headphone experience. And so those three things, headphones, near field, directional active bass, those are sort of the three discoveries that I wish I had known about and then pursued 30 years ago. And that's what I have on that subject. If you have any questions, please chime in now.
Oh, we have questions. Actually, I think what you've described, Srajan, perfectly meshes with my thoughts on what I wish I'd not so much known, but at least understood. And I'm going to go first this time, Edgar, because I think I sort of feel like fashion, or I guess what was written about and the style of product, I got sort of railroaded into that to some degree. Although there's always different styles of systems written about: big speakers, small speakers, near field, floor standing, big thumping great things, etc. But I feel like, okay, because I was kind of brought up on the UK way, so it was that BBC sort of sound, and it was, that quite often is smaller speakers, or certainly not something that sits on the floor, and cause, like I said earlier, mid-range sort of orientated as far as performance, and then you sort of, if you think back to the 70s and 80s with UK designed and manufactured speakers, they were a bit lazy in the bass, a bit pear-shaped, as Srajan, I think, very correctly A great analogy, because that's exactly what most hi-fi systems are. Either there's no pear shape because there's no bass, or if there is bass, quite often it is, it sounds slower. Yeah. Now, whether it actually is, like you alluded to, that it's more of a delayed sound that makes it sound slow than it actually how punchy, if you like, the bass units are. But yeah, I think that's a very valid point for a lot of people, is that you buy into what you're led to believe, whether it's your favourite hi-fi store's belief or magazine or what have you, that these are the loudspeakers and this is how you build a system around it. It's a bit like the old Lin way, where obviously rubbish in, rubbish out, or whatever, and you spend all your money on a turntable, which is a convenient marketing ploy, because of course at that stage they were primarily selling turntables, I guess, with a few speakers. But I mean, it's I frankly thought it was bullshit then, and I don't think it really is at all. But you have to have decent uncoloured speakers first, then a good turntable, I felt. But that's not what Ivor said. So once again, there's an example of a story. It's a fashion. If you want to be one of the cool kids and be a Lin name kind of guy, then you need to buy clearly an LP12 and spend a whole lot of money. And that's not what I did, because I didn't frankly believe in it. So what am I saying? I was led astray by fashion, but then I didn't follow it anyhow. I don't know. But I love what you're saying there, Srajan, where you found the kind of system that works for you and the reasons why. And, I completely understand that. I think I've done the same. I think I've tried all sorts of different things over the years, and eventually I've kind of found what my priorities are. And I feel my priorities are slightly different to yours, but they don't fit in my room, because I really like the idea of sort of some giant, wide baffle sort of John DeVore style loudspeakers, because I kind of like that presentation the same way as you like yours, but I would agree it's probably a little bit pear-shaped, and not necessarily John's loudspeakers, but ones that have let me say the opposite of what has become for many decades these skinny, narrow baffle speakers. I don't find as much love for those as I do something with some width, something with a 12-inch driver in it. But it's certainly pear-shaped. Now, could you answer me a question, Srajan, regarding this style of woofer? Many moons ago, in the early, maybe the mid-90s, I'm pretty sure it was Quad. Someone had a very strange subwoofer. A major manufacturer had a subwoofer that was a dome, a spherical dome each side, sort of a box in the middle. There was two 12-inch woofers facing each other, just as you described, and the bass kind of, it was a strange subwoofer. So it was a subwoofer, not a full-range speaker. And I can't remember what make it is. And they came and they went, and they were lauded for about 5 minutes, no doubt for the reasons you like your setup. I presume it was exactly that, somewhat directional bass that worked better in most rooms. But I couldn't get a quantity of bass out of them, and in the early 90s they were still chasing a quantity of bass, apparently, so I never really developed a strong love for them. But Srajan, as someone who's been in the business a long time, do you remember what the hell those... Are they an early subwoofer commercial design along the lines of what you have? Oops, bang the mic.
I'm not sure, because, like I said, my fascination with and exploration of subwoofers doesn't go that far back.
Yes.
Now, a name that I recall, which may be the one that you're looking for, is Back End, but I don't remember any details. Now, the Axel Ritthaler patent on this Ripole configuration expired a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So there's a number of manufacturers now that have embraced it, including Audio Group Denmark, with the Burson speakers. But Secret Linkford has variations on a folded open baffle, which I believe he calls H-frame. But how far those go back in time, like when this type of subwoofer first became available commercially, that I don't know. Because in the early days, when I got into hi-fi through primarily stereophile, subwoofers for music were pretty much taboo.
Yeah.
As were active speakers.
Exactly. And almost active speakers, unless you're looking at smaller ones that do a whole heap of digital, mastery, including streaming and so on. But in the in those high end, they still don't accept active speakers. But on paper, they'd be perfect, and I don't know why they're not accepted. But I mean, there's the small KEF speakers, and there are other active speakers that are getting more serious and larger and more output and so on. But for some reason, there's a barrier, and some audiophiles, especially the older ones, want to still screw around with changing valves in their amplifier, and they want to do tweaks, and so and they want to have a turntable, and that.
There is. Now, if I may,
yes, you may.
Some brands, Genelec, Grimm, Dutch and Dutch,
yes,
Key, I think it's actually been at least 10 years since that active speakers are taboo in the high end is no longer true. Yeah. Except that the older audiophiles,
the old ones,
us, on the whole,
speak for yourself, Scott.
On the whole, tend to still not accept them. But I do believe that the younger audience that is coming in, that expects one device to do more and more, because cell phones these days are so multifunctional. They want that same kind of do-it-all thinking applied also to other appliances, in this case, sound appliances. And the KEF that you mentioned has been extremely popular. Yeah. And if you're sold on that, and now you want to upgrade, you want a bigger KEF, there's a good chance that you might end up with a Key, or with a Grimm, or a Dutch and Dutch, or a bigger Genelec. And this would be my fourth point that I didn't mention, because this is not a path that I have traveled. But if I started again, or if I had a son that was in his mid-20s, out of school, started to make his own money now, I would say forget passive speakers. Forget the whole system building. You can always do that later if you feel so inclined. But to start out with, get yourself a pair of active streaming speakers. That have DSP adjustment. You can still twiddle and tweak the sound to your liking, but you will get much better sound, much more linear sound for the money than you can do with this mix and match, routine that the three of us grew up with and loved, learned to love and enjoy.
Find the sound of your life by crafting a quality stereo system with the HiFi Shop. Featuring all the brands you know and love: Rega turntables, Bowers and Wilkins loudspeakers, Exposure electronics, amplifiers and CD players from the UK, and of course Sonos Faber loudspeakers from Italy. The HiFi Shop helps you create your sound. Visit the team at hifishop.com.au. Yeah, I completely agree that certainly it's hard to beat the linearity, the accuracy, and the all-round capabilities of of any kind of active. Active in general offers more of that. It doesn't offer the hobbyist, if you like, the tinkering and the fiddling, and I think that's why for a certain audience, which apparently, according to Edgar, are quite old now, doesn't offer them their hobbyist thrills. But I think that's I agree 100% with Srajan there. I think a younger audience, both, I see it all the time in my life in this business, is that, that the people that own some of those really inexpensive active speakers are absolutely younger people, and because they don't realise that the correct way to go is to have a separate turntable, amplifier and speakers. They just want some sound that's great, and they've found it through going down that path. So they're yet to realise the flailings of or yet to become, like we were talking about earlier. They've yet to turn into an audiophile. Heaven forbid.
But I think there's no specific correlation between age group and twinkering and liking passive sound.
Except
so
the passing of time, though, right?
Yeah.
From the point
right,
of view
so
that they've discovered the hobbyist aspect of the.
But I'm sure, given the options, I think some might think, well, that's not for me. I just like a one box solution, and I just want to stream from my phone.
Yeah.
And there'd be others that would say, they would be just as young, saying, hey, I really want to fuck around with these valves, and I really want to play with vinyl, and so I'm quite happy with the passive sound, and to me they sound amazing. So that's another thing. But coming back to a whole focus point of what tonight was meant to be about is, for me, what I wish I'd known when I first got into this was room acoustics. Because I wasted a whole lot of money changing gear, trying to improve the sound when really the room should have been addressed. But then I guess in those early days, I didn't own my house, and I was moving from apartment to apartment where I didn't have the option of messing around with acoustics. So I had to kind of more or less adapt to what I had at the time. But certainly since probably the late 90s or so, I've been playing around with improving room acoustics with as much of my resources as I could at the time. Where I got to this point where my current room sounded like a cave, and I designed my own acoustic treatment plan and carried it out, and I have a fairly neutral room now, and I'm very lucky that the wall behind the speakers is very lossy because it opens out into a garage. Well, it doesn't open out. Sorry, it's the back wall of my listening room is the front wall of the garage. So I have a lot of lossy bass back into that room, which kind of, in conjunction with the room size, adds up to having a fairly flat response in the room. So again, it's lottery. You win the lottery sometimes.
Well, it is.
So
it is lottery. But you could plan. But I think the thing with room acoustics, Edgar, not wanting to cut you off as such, but I completely agree, and I think we all knew that, because you've only got to, well, anyone who's been in hi-fi retailing, they do a demo in the store, they make a sale back in the good old days where you then take it out that night to the client's house and set it up for them, is made very quickly aware that, stereos, the same stereo can sound dramatically different in obviously different spaces. And then and certainly that's what happened to me. And from a point of view of trying to flog more stereo equipment, I wanted to understand how I could get both do a better demo at the store and get also a better result for the client. And so the study sort of began, probably similar to yourself, but more of maybe a commercial venture. But the point is, yes, I think everybody says that room acoustics are the thing, and Srajan's just been saying that as far as bass, and you're saying that as far as, everything, I guess.
The overall?
Yes.
Yeah, the overall experience,
yes. Yeah. And I frankly think it's much, much more important than just about anyone's talking about. You can literally take a good $10,000 system and make it sound amazing if you put it in an amazing space. But actually, most people aren't building amazing spaces because, well,
and conversely,
it's a big expense in itself, right?
Sure. And I was going to say, conversely, you can get a $500,000 system in a poor room and make it sound like a $1,000 system.
Well, that's right.
You can go the other way around. In other words, you can totally spoil the potential of a very high end system by not looking into acoustics. But I think that most people who are at that level are kind of mindful about room acoustics in some way. Whether they actually deal with it completely or not, that's another thing. But yeah.
I think there's not enough dealing with it. I'm not going to go on about it tonight, but it's not one of my things I wish I knew, because I think I always knew it because, maybe just that whole buying a system and setting it up in a different room and going, oh, it sounds kind of crap, like why? But it did take a few years until I started kind of understanding what to do about it, other than the standard, pull them out of the corners, don't sit on the centre line of the room, the super basic stuff, I guess. But yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of us went, oh, we need better speaker cable because, I'm getting less bass or something than I was out of these at the store. But that's where you start as a newbie, I guess. But yeah, moving the speakers around and moving a listening position around and throwing a rug on that shiny tiled floor would be great places to start. And there are people not even doing that, so yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there anything else, Edgar, that you feel like you wish you'd known at the start?
There's been incremental things, in the God knows how many decades I've been doing this for. But I think that one of the other things, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think of this, but I think that early on we may have been influenced by the cult of personality, where we kind of followed the trends at the time set by very key people in industry, especially in the earlier days of the industry, where there wasn't so many companies doing what they're doing now. So the cult of personality was another thing where if you didn't have the equipment that was from a certain company, then you weren't really a serious guy, And
yes.
So that's one thing that, to the exclusion of people companies that were doing excellent things as well, just as good, sometimes not as good, sometimes better, but they didn't have that pull of the cult of personalities. So that's one thing that I wish maybe I was less influenced by early on.
Yeah, well, I would.
Yeah, but as you mature in
Outlook,
in Outlook,
I was absolutely coloured by that because I guess it's what you do as a teenager or someone relatively young. You want to fit in and you want to be where the cool kids are, right? So that's in the 70s, we all know the brands. I mentioned one or two of them earlier, and there was a few more, but then you may have followed a different religion, perhaps, say, the Klipsch religion or the JBL religion. I mean, to some degree.
And we all, if we all knew, back then what we know now, we'd be in a different place now. So
yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of made us what we are now. So I guess I don't actually regret any of those things, but wishing that I knew them, maybe, but I don't regret the place where I am now.
There's a branding thing there that the best marketer wins, right, to some degree, and marketing's kind of cool and branding's, kind of cool in a way, there were a lot of great brands around. A lot of those brands are still around. I mean, those designers that got those brands started, those engineers were also, without realising it, great marketers. I mentioned Ivor before, but I mean, there's the Julian Vericas, but there was a bunch of other great personalities. I mean, not too long ago, we interviewed Arthur Kobasarian from Pink Triangle. I mean, that was very particular marketing. I think backed up by a great product, but I mean, it's just these are the things that I remember for the 70s that stood out. I think the magazines, they really jumped on them. We don't know why.
Yeah.
But
but we back then, because this is shows our demographic, but back then in the 1970s, this was a young industry.
Yes, good point.
It was a very young industry, so obviously we were influenced by the key people that were successful at the time.
Yes,
and these guys, there's very few of them left.
Well, the guys themselves, there is very few of them left.
Companies changed. The guys themselves changed. So, but the fact that these guys are no longer there, the companies are different.
The companies are different, absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole subject, whole conversation one day in itself. Srajan, were you a bit drawn towards particular brands when you started on this adventure?
No, I was exposed to certain ones that we carried in the store that I eventually worked for.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to add a little twist.
Sure.
Because there was something that occurred to me while the two of you were just speaking, and that is that not only have, since the three of us started many, many decades ago, not only have subwoofers for music become acceptable, and active speakers have become more acceptable,
Mm-hmm.
even though they still haven't hit the complete home run, but Class D has become acceptable.
Sure. Yes.
Now, the problem that Class D has is related to something Edgar says. There is no celebrity designers associated with it yet. In Class A, we have Nelson Pass, we have Dan D'Agostino, we have some really famous personages that go way back that are associated with that have become like evangelists. The only name that I believe the average person, myself included, associates with Class D as a celebrity designer would be Bruno Puzzis.
Indeed.
Yes.
And most people would associate Bruno with Hypex and Encore in OEM modules sold by the likes of NAD and Arcam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They would not associate them with Mola, where the same or a related module will cost you 17,000 euros for a pair of monoblocks. So I think Class D still has the issue that in the public perception, they haven't sort of leveled up to the big name solid state brands in Class A and Class AB. But sonically, it's no longer true that Class D is just fit for subwoofers. In fact, there's now Class D designs that have been deliberately modeled on Class A transistor sound. And they are much cheaper, they're much smaller, they are much lighter.
Much more efficient.
Much more efficient. They're greener. This is something else that a younger audiophile that doesn't have the discretionary income to do a whole lot of mix and match and experiment, I would steer them towards a good Class D amplifier.
Yeah,
because
I would, agree.
I've heard a number of them that I find are completely on par with expensive Class A, Class AB, classic linear amplifiers. And the last thing I want to add is that Chinese hi-fi has made real progress over the last 10 years. And there's now Chinese companies making equipment that competes head-to-head with the best in the West for obviously lower pricing, because that's still the advantage that they have. But it's no longer the case as of like 10 or 15 years ago, where chi-fi was a derogatory term for cheap and cheerful and maybe not very reliable, right?
Yes.
That has completely changed. And so again, if I had a son or friends with younger folk trying to get into the hobby, I would steer them towards looking at Chinese-made products, because they offer more for less money, and they are no longer just quote-unquote rip-offs of Western circuits that they're copying, but they now have legitimate, creative, from-the-ground-up designs that I think are really worthwhile looking into. I have to say that because my income as a reviewer is not unlimited, that the majority of components that I own, and I have 5 active systems, and I have like more than that in separate HiFi stations, I would say about 80 to 90% of it is Chinese made. And I could not afford that level of quality if I bought American or
German or
German, British, French, what have you. So this is no diss of the Western product. It's just that limited funds and an educated ear with high expectations is looking at China these days. And I think that too has become more legitimate. And you find now Class A rated components in stereophile that are Chinese made. Yeah. That was unheard of maybe, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a change.
Yeah.
It's a change.
Yes.
So I was going to say it's a change that it's a global thing, and it's not just. And what I mean by global, it's not just audio. I mean, the automotive industry, again, is an example. So the world is changing, and I think Western companies have to take the challenge, because otherwise they'll disappear. So, and how do they handle that? So they'll have to get their products designed in Europe, States, wherever, and they get manufactured in China. Which erodes the manufacturing base of those countries. But how do we cope with those changes? How do we tackle that?
Well, I've got strong feelings as usual. If you look at recent, say, 20-year history of what happened to Japanese manufacturing, they've already gone through it. I mean, we did an episode a while ago on what the hell happened to the very nice Japanese hi-fi brands. Well, actually, a lot of them are still around, but they're owned by someone else and they're made in China, most of them. But what happened to what happened to Sony's TVs and things like that? Well, they sort of chased South Korea, and then they didn't do a very good job of it, and they went away. I feel like the European and the American brands could do well to keep doing what they do well, which is a very beautifully designed and manufactured product, offering sort of qualities in areas outside of perhaps what the Chinese products are offering, which a lot of people care less about. I mean, B&O, for instance, has clearly a place in a lot of houses, but not every house. Not Srajan's house, not my house, probably not yours, Edgar, because it's not a serious hi-fi product. But you can't say that they don't offer something that Chinese are yet to offer, which is that exceptional, I guess, industrial design, and so this little sort of certain je ne sais quoi that they have, as does Sonos Farmer.
I think what Srajan was saying, and I kind of agree with it, is that these Chinese companies, and there's many of them. These Chinese companies are actually producing equipment that is just as well designed in terms of industrial design. They're innovative. They have even circuit designs and features that are new.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
absolutely. The performance, the value for money equation absolutely leans strongly, in my opinion, to those brands that Srajan probably has in his house. They, the Weems of the world, the Eversolos, etc., offer so much for such an entirely sensible amount of money. Clearly, for a lot of people, that's going to be their choice, and I'm that's a reality. The Names of the world, who have a similar product to an Eversolo, as in Name Audio UK, is something that I guess it's to go back to automotive. It's Bentley, it's Rolls Royce, it's to a slight, next strata down, the BMWs of the Mercedes of the world versus the Kias and the BYDs and the what have you. And so there's something for everyone. I don't think there's if you want to have what you perceive and maybe you feel your friends will perceive as a superior product, and you're trying to, the same reason people buy Land Rovers or buy a Range Rover, there's no logical choice to have one of those contraptions. There's no need for it in the first world. No one needs the off-road capability. No one needs the size really, but people buy them, lots of them. So I think there's still a strong future for the fancier products of hi-fi. But my God, yes, we reviewed a Weem all-in-one amplifier streamer thing, sells in this country for $8.99. We didn't find anything bad about it whatsoever. It was amazingly good, frustratingly good in a way if you kind of have a long love for certain brands that are really, they're now looking overpriced. But there's still a place for them. But I think, ever increasingly, the same as is happening in automotive, Edgar, there's a very strong swing away from those traditional car brands towards what China is producing, and like it's a huge change, as big a change as AI or the internet.
And with those sorts of products, with the European products, we and when I say we, is probably our generation is placing that extra value onto those products, purely because of where they come from. But I think that once this generation kind of gets out of the industry, the newer players that come on, the newer generations don't place that same sort of value, or maybe they do. I don't know. But I'm thinking out loud. Maybe they don't place that same sort of value on where the product comes from, like we do, and they care more about how it performs, how it's built, what the features are, how much it costs, and all those sorts of things.
I think you're very right. And
I don't know what you think, Srajan, as well on that, and because this was going on from your incentive to talk about this.
I
was going to say,
I would
Srajan,
just add what you just said, Edgar. There is an element of sentimentality, whereby our generation has relationships of one sort or another with certain brands. Even if we never owned them, we may have aspired to own them. Indeed. They stood for something, and that has not necessarily been replaced with an audio music or a Kinky Studio or a Sengran or a Gustard or a Denner Frips name, whereas the people that are coming to the industry now or 5 years ago, they may not have any association with early Krell, early Threshold, early Audio Research, Conrad Johnson,
that's what I mean.
So they're not sort of loaded down with sort of this legacy stuff. They get to look at the picture the way it is today without bringing the past into it.
Basically, you said that, in a much more eloquent way. That's exactly what I meant.
Nicely done. So you took what Edgar and I was thinking and you managed to verbalise it rather, as Edgar said, very eloquently. It is that it's not just whether you owned it, it's whether you wanted to own it. And I mean, I think I'm a bit like that when it comes to automotive. You're like, well, as a child, I wanted a Lamborghini. I don't really want one anymore, but let's say a Ferrari. I'd still love to have one. But, it's... the performance of that car, as an example, is bettered by most electric cars that cost a tenth of the money. So it's a great analogy for what's happening in HiFi, Srajan, where you spent a tenth as much on your Chinese source pieces that perform equally, well, not equally, but very closely. But they don't perform mentally perhaps as well, in the sense of they're not satisfying this long-held desire to own a piece of this particular brand, because you hankered after it at a time when you didn't have the wherewithal to purchase it. I think there's a lot of change happening with that right now, huge amount, and I think a lot of smaller manufacturers are not grappling with it at all and not realising that they're chasing a smaller and smaller decreasing market for their boutique products, and that needs to be a genuinely bespoke boutique product to work, I feel, in that smaller marketplace. Thoughts on that, Srajan, as far as and you, Edgar, as well, actually, on sort of more small volume? I may immediately go to Devon Turnbull's OJAS thing that's going on at the moment, which everyone's talking about and has been for probably a year or two, where people are buying a very basic piece of hi-fi at a fairly lofty price because he's associated with it.
You would say you had some thoughts, Srajan, so you go for it.
I have a question for you, Edgar. Now, our listeners don't know that we're actually on a video call, so we can see each other. So what I'm seeing behind Edgar on the wall is Australian-made Supratech valve preamp. And here's my obvious question to you, Edgar, is over your career in audio reviewing, looking at 2026, personally, how much relevance do valves still hold to your preferences? And would you prefer tubes in your source, like a CD player or streamer, in a preamp, in an amplifier?
Okay, personally, highly relevant still, valve amplification technology. And for me, it's the preamp. And that's why that is sitting there. And that's why that particular preamp is the one single component that I've held on to for the longest in my entire... I think I've had that for at least 15 years, in various versions of it. Okay, so for me, the heart of a system is a preamp, although strictly speaking, on a technical level, it's not necessary. The source puts out enough voltage to drive the amplifier to plenty SPLs. But to me, the valves in a preamp, when it's well designed, and that hands over to a well designed solid state amplifier that can transmit the qualities of that preamp unscathed onto the speakers. To me, for my tastes, that's the ideal thing. That particular preamp, I've compared to everything I've reviewed. I've reviewed, dozens and dozens of preamps that were far more expensive than that. And to me, and I've kept this over anything. To me, it's phenomenal. So yeah, for me, the formula, to answer your question, valve technology is highly relevant for my tastes and in my opinion. For me, it works as a preamp fitting a great solid state power amplifier. And maybe I'm old-fashioned, but this, that just brings a truth in tone and dynamics, and in that case, superbly controlled bass, as good as a solid state preamp. So yeah, in that area, yeah.
Andrew, how about you and tubes? Have you done them in the past? Are you still doing them?
I involved with tubes very regularly because I have to, in my day job, have to fix the bloody things. Well, not the tubes, you just chuck them away, right? But I've never actually released the vacuum. Well, I have released the vacuum from a few tubes, but never been able to put it back in again. But I like just about all equipment for what it actually is. I'm a strong believer in you probably need 2 or 3 stereos at home. I've generally ever only had one because I've always had another one or two or many at a store, as someone who's always owned a retail hi-fi store almost always until recently. And so, I like different flavours. And, I like tubes. And I agree with Edgar. I think a tube preamp is a less... I think you give less away. You get you get all the sweetness and the loveliness of tubes in a preamp without perhaps, creating as much heat in efficiency. I sort of feel a little bit strongly about that. I think certainly any amplifier that runs outrageously warm, particularly when you live in a warm part of the world as I do, is not a great idea. It probably won't last that long, and it will create waste a lot of energy and heat the room up. So I do prefer a cooler amp, but I love a tube preamp, and tube phono stage is a nice thing, I think. Maybe too much of a good thing sometimes, but I do like the integrateds and power amps as well. So love tubes, I love digital, I love analog, I like big speakers, small speakers. If I had to have only one system, I don't know what the answer is. So I think, I'd say streaming, and I'd say solid state, and I'd say medium-sized speakers. How's that? Not that anyone's asking that question, but I'll throw it out there. But I sort of, I'm not sure whether this, Srajan, you're being a little sneaky and you're trying to leverage what do China need to do next to satisfy Edgar and myself. I would say I agree with Edgar's choice with the preamp. It's a piece of equipment that he really loves, and it does all of the things that he needs to do. He needs a preamp to do, to the point where it's the preamp that he loves and prefers, and he's kept it for a long time. And I would say the same thing about probably my Name Unity Star, which had a much lower level of sort of fanciness, if you like, and it's a different sound altogether. I have stuck with for a long time as the core of my main system, because it really does all the things I need it to do, and it does them very well. And one of those things is that I can play with my phone, select music, and turn the volume up and down all in one screen. And I feel strongly about that, and that makes me not an audiophile, I believe. Because it's...
can we throw that question back to you, Srajan? Is it something that you own that you can't let go of because you love it so much? Is it one piece of equipment that has been consistent throughout the years for you, more than any other?
Well, I'm not an owner in terms of a house. I'm the eternal renter. And in the past, it has meant that every 3 to 5 years, I would move house.
Mm-hmm.
That meant new room acoustics. And as we discussed, the biggest variable then becomes, will the speaker that worked really well in the last house work equally well in the new house? And if it doesn't, you're going to make a change. So the speaker I currently have, I haven't changed since I've got it. But in my next move, whenever that happens, will it still work as well? That I couldn't predict. So the speaker I've held on to the longest is a Polish speaker by a company called Qualio Audio. And it is a 3-way where the top 2 drivers are on an open baffle.
Mm-hmm.
So and this also goes back to my previous mention of the RAL ribbon ear speakers, which don't have a box. They don't have an enclosure. And if one becomes, or I should just speak for myself, once I became really sensitized to this boxless point source, super high-speed transducer that has 0 energy storage, I wanted a similar type of feeling with the speaker. And I realized that if you go to an open baffle speaker, if I went to an open baffle speaker, at least for the majority bandwidths, I would have that same absence of box talk. Now, what that is, most people will never know because they're used to it. Mm-hmm. And it's like a fish in water. You don't know the water until you jump out and start walking on land. And this is something that you only notice when it's gone. But once I notice that it's gone, now I don't want the boxy sound. And that's why I've held onto those speakers. But it's something that, Andrew, you said earlier, that if you do dipole bass of any persuasion, whether it's folded or completely open, because you're losing output to the sides. So if just arbitrarily we say 6 surfaces in a room, 4 walls, ceiling, and floor, and they all become reflective, which means they add to the sound. If we remove 2 of them, we're already 1/3 down in terms of SPL. We are less efficient by 1/3. Now, if we see that the same cancellation actually also happens to the top and the bottom, above and below the subwoofer, we have less reflection from the ceiling and the floor. It's not exactly 2/3, but we are down about half.
Yes.
Which means a dipole subwoofer is less efficient. And the way to make up for it is, 1, cone surface, which means you want dual 15s, you want dual 18s, even beyond. And second, some kind of DSP compensation where wherever that thing wants to roll off naturally, if the driver is capable and you have the amplifier power, you bump it up, and maybe you're up 5 dB at 20 or 3 dB at 20 just to compensate. It's possible, but dipole bass is less efficient than box bass, especially if you place a box subwoofer in a corner to get boundary loading.
Yes.
But why did I end up there? I think I just got distracted by my own train of thought. You had asked me a question, Edgar, about,
favorites.
A component that I didn't change. Yeah, it would be the speaker. Everything else has has changed quite a lot. I will say that contrary to you, I'm an anti-preamp guy and have been for a long time.
Right. Yeah.
I have pretty much all the DACs that I have analog volume control, or like in the case of the Sonnet Pasticea, it's a discrete R2R DAC that uses variable reference voltage.
Yeah.
That's how it controls volume. It's completely non-lossy. And all my systems are quote unquote voiced or tuned to not need a preamp. And so the moment I inject a preamp, what I notice is the sound gets thicker, fatter, denser, slower, more less resolved. Basically, somebody's stepping on the brakes. So I know what it can provide, but my systems just don't need that. And so now I have one less component, which I'm very happy about. But I have reviewed and for a while even owned. It might have been the preamp that you have. It was one Mick Maloney Supertech. He calls them all after wine varietals.
Wines, yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What's yours called?
This is a Cortez.
No, it wasn't a Cortez. It was something else. I don't remember, but it was with the outboard power supply.
Yes, yeah. Like I think they all have an outboard power supply.
Yeah.
It would have been one of his early ones. It's interesting. We all have different ways to skin the same cat, So for me, I've found that whenever I've gone, and I can do the same, I can actually feed my DAC straight into a power amp if I want to, and it's got a fairly good volume control. And if I don't go below a certain point, I'm not losing any bits. I'm not bit stripping in any way. I find that for me, it just lacks some sort of textural, tonal richness. Dynamics aren't quite as extended. But, that could be a technical thing. That could be a mismatch in terms of impedances. So, yeah. So for me, in my case, in my opinion, for my tastes, a good valve preamp is essential. Yeah.
Well, I think here it might be nice to reiterate that whatever our preferred solution becomes in terms of how to build a HiFi is completely informed by the complete arbitrariness of our path. That arbitrariness is down to what we were exposed to at a given time and what our discretionary income was. Like whatever the first system was that sort of blew the lid off, whether that was a clip system or a system with electrostatic speaker or small monitors with a subwoofer or big mutton, whatever it was, that's what we then pursued and tried to duplicate. And that set us in a particular direction. And we didn't explore all the 150,000 other directions we could have.
Yeah.
And so I think to come up with like a one-size-fits-all recommendation or recipe that we could pass on to the younger generation, I think it's completely impossible. And I would also say that I don't think any two people hear the same. I think that hearing can be trained. And I think that what we listen for, like what our trigger points are, is very different too. For example, I was brought up around the clarinet. I started playing it or learning it when I was 5.5 years old. My two siblings played the French horn. There was a piano in the house. My dad also played the guitar. Except for the piano and the guitar, the instruments that I grew up with and that I practiced on could only play one note at a time. So what I'm sensitive to is melody, because that's what I was about. Timbre, because any instrumentalist worth their salt will work on a recognizable tone, whereby a David Sanborn sounds different than a Kenny G, even though they both play saxophone. I mean, 3 seconds in, you know who is playing it.
Yeah.
Or Michael Brecker, again, completely different sound, right? So I'm sensitive to that. Now, Ken McCullough, who currently writes for Stereophile, but he wrote for me for a while, he was trained as a drummer. So I know for a fact, I don't even have to speak to him, that his trigger points will be very different from mine.
Yes.
He's into rhythm, into transient attack. if I had grown up around a piano, I wouldn't just be sensitive to melody. I would be very sensitive to harmony, which is the vertical dimension of music, not the horizontal dimension. Right. So depending on, well, in this case, depending on what instrument one plays, one becomes locked into a particular way of perceiving, which is very different from somebody else. And I also believe that, like most things in life, they say it takes 10 years to achieve mastery in anything, whether it's football, whatever it is, it takes at least 10 years. But it's also true that our brain is the most malleable, and that different synapses and neural pathways are being established while we're very young. So if you want to become a world-class musician, you have to start very early. The difference between starting to play the piano at 5 years versus at 30 years is huge.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Like, my parents learned the clarinet together with me because I was so young that my mom used to observe the lessons. So she remembered what I was supposed to be learning at home. That's how my parents learned the clarinet. But I was 5 years old. They were 25 years older. They started at 30. They never acquired the fine motor mechanics in their fingers that I did because they started too late. So what I mean to say by that is that if you grow up listening at 5 years and listening with a lot of attention versus coming to it much later in life, there should be expected to be a difference in listening sensibilities,
acuity,
or maturity of noticing things. So when certain people on certain forums say that certain things are not audible, like, no way this guy heard that. That's not possible. I think they assume that everybody hears like them. And to forget that there's people whose listening is finer, and there's people whose listening is even less developed. There's all kinds of sort of different levels.
Yeah.
And if we find a system that satisfies us, we should stop right then and there. We shouldn't sort of model ourselves on what we presume is somebody else's enjoyment because they have very fancy lingo to describe their experiences. And we think, well, I never had one of those. I want me one of them. And then you get lost on this journey that may actually end up taking you away from your particular way of doing it and enjoying it, and you become all kind of completely twisted. And what I have noticed a lot, and the two of you tell me whether this is something you can relate to, is that a lot of audiophiles, as they get older, and they have worked their way on making more and more complicated systems with outboard power supplies and separates and this and that, very often at the end, they opt out. And if they then still want one system, they simplify it. Suddenly, they want to go very basic and very simple and leave all of that complexity behind. Now, Andrew, I assume from what you said before that until recently, at least, you worked in a hi-fi retail environment. So you must have observed a lot of clients getting older and trading things and buying new things. Have you noticed that some of them, instead of getting more complicated and more expensive, they actually go the other way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of one of them, right? So although I can't say I've ever had a particularly elaborate system at home, I've had all kinds of loudspeakers at home. Obviously things that we had in the store really it's why I got into hi-fi retailing, right? So you could have a new stereo every week. So I did that for many years and then I kind of settled down, right? But absolutely, because I have spent time in the name world, lots of very elaborate classic name systems have been traded in against, a piece of Unity equipment. And I don't know that that's an absolute sort of, that's a defining fashion. I think it's just, I feel strongly that people go through phases, as you do with speakers, depending on what house you're in. I think people go, I'm sick of all this crap that I've got to turn 4 boxes or 8 boxes on and off every time I want to listen to some music. I'm just going to do what I do. Like I wasn't being slightly flippant perhaps about being able to control it by my phone, but I do like whether it's a tablet or whatever. But the point is, I like to be able to just turn it on, turn it up, select the music, turn it down, and I'm sick of music, so I'm going to watch TV and hit TV sound, and I think it's at which point I then use an infrared remote control because it's much easier to turn the ad volume up and down if we're still listening to free to air. But of course, in fact, we're probably watching YouTube and turning the YouTube ads down because I'm too tight with money to pay for premium. But getting back to the thing, yes, saw a lot of that, traded a lot of classic systems in. Admittedly, this is a few years ago. I've been out of retailing for 6 years. I saw that. Saw certainly less of the complicated system building, I think, yes. In fact, I think generally there's less of that in more mature clients. But if we look at what younger people are doing with serious music systems, they've got 2 turntables, they've got a DJ mixer, they've got, subwoofers, large speakers, there's either they're active or there's a power amp or 2, active as in built-in active. And so actually I think as a younger enthusiast in audio, you do hanker after a more complex system, maybe. I mean, record playing's complex for a start. I mean, it's that's part of the complexity. If you're looking for a simpler life, you're going to be streaming, I think, perhaps. Edgar, what do you?
I think so. I mean,
do you do a bit of what do you like? You've got a turntable, right? But if you're listening to music for yourself, like discovering music, and I want to turn this into a streaming versus records, but it is a simpler thing, right?
Yeah, no, I tend to do a lot of streaming, and that's how I discover a lot of music because the playback systems or the software is getting smarter and smarter, or suggesting stuff that's similar to what you're listening at that time. So depending on the genre that I'm listening to, at the time I'm discovering new music. But I think to answer part of the question was, I think it's hard for some people to step out of the tribe, to go out on their own and step away from that tribal thing.
Yes.
So I see when I was involved with audio clubs, I haven't been for several years now, but when I was involved with clubs, I saw people who stayed in the club and you could tell the passion was just gone.
Yeah, okay.
But they want to still belong in that tribe.
Ah, yes.
And so they didn't necessarily simplify things, and they got to a point where they actually totally stepped out, basically sold off everything, and I'm out. And so it was they had to get to that point. But I mean, relatively speaking, my system's quite simple compared to some of the systems I've seen lately.
Really?
It's just source, preamp, power amp. That's it. With speakers, and that's it.
What's all that crap behind you? What's all that?
DSP stuff. Part of that stuff is what I'm reviewing at the moment.
Oh,
and it's just there. But So the component you see below the SuperTech is something I'm reviewing at the moment, and that's only there. The SuperTech is only on top, only because this afternoon I was actually doing some very, very quick A/B things between the two, and I didn't want to, oral memory. I didn't want to take away the other preamp, put the other one, reconnect everything. So I had it all as close as possible, so that the changeover could be real quick, And so, but no, it's source. Obviously, all sources except I'm not in. Not that I don't like it, not that I don't see the qualities, but I'm not doing tape. So vinyl, CD, and streaming. Mm-hmm. The majority of my listening at the moment is with a very, very good streamer, where I can just have, because the sound room is also my office, I can have that going. I can work at the same time. So that's in the background. And then when I sit down to listen, I actually, I'm streaming as well. So, yeah.
Srajan, I didn't mean to turn it into a records versus streaming discussion, but if we were alluding to simpler systems, that's part of it, is it? Is it, getting away from records? Having got back into records, you're getting away from them again? Because I think there's a bit of that happening as well. Not that records overall are doing anything other than becoming more popular, I think. But perhaps a lot of more mature age, long-term hi-fi enthusiasts are, I think, actually are doing more streaming than younger people who I feel are hankering more after records.
I've never owned a single record in my life.
No,
So
what the hell?
Yeah, I can't possibly
Hang on,
comment.
back up. What did you just say? You've never owned a single record in your life?
I haven't.
Wow. All right.
So you were listening to your parents' records, and then when you started reviewing or being into hi-fi, you had digital
CDs. I had a big CD collection.
Right.
And then when I started reviewing, I realized that I had nothing to add to the vinyl coverage because there were experts like Michael Fremer and his acolytes that had 20 or 30 years on me in terms of experience. What did I have to add? There was no stimulation or impetus as a reviewer to get into vinyl. Plus, the music that I was into, which stemmed from my travels, was what's called world music, which is not what was easily found on vinyl. Vinyl seemed to be very strong on rock and pop and jazz and classical, but that genre was not represented. So I drifted into CDs. And I really I got rid of my CD collection during the last house move.
Okay.
And they were in storage anyway. So I had then ripped all of my CDs, and now it's purely streaming. But I wanted to take a little detour, which unfortunately I think, Andrew, leaves you out.
Hey, if you love a good story of a wonderful piece of hi-fi equipment and how it's produced by a team of talented staff who have a real sense of pride in the product that they create, it's almost like they're delivering a baby every time they pop one in a box and send it off to a dealer, then you might want to check out Devore Fidelity, episode 38. John explains in some detail how they keep as much as they can in-house and both design and produce those wonderful wide baffle loudspeakers and the narrow baffle ones in New York. So check that out, episode 38. Also a great story of how you go about making things with real pride and the spin-off benefits of that, longevity, pride of ownership, and wonderful performance, that extra last little bit of performance that comes through from real care being taken. Srajan, you mentioned you're going to go off at a tangent and I don't need to be involved. Edgar is obviously going to answer your question. Fire away.
Okay, so some of our listeners may think that audio reviewing is like the perfect job. And Edgar and I have been doing it for decades now. So to get towards my question, what's true for me is that over the years, what I consider to be my perfect sound, the sound that I like, has become so specific that if I just change one little thing, it's no longer quite it. As long as it stays sort of in the inner circle of the bullseye, I'm still happy. But once it leaves that, in a way, I can't wait to get back to my sound, which means that each and every time something comes in for review, unless it just happens to overlay, I have to be honest and say, well, I can't wait to get back to my system. By the same token, though, I have to give the component that comes in its fair due. I have to make it sound the best that I know how to do, and I have to imagine the perfect audience for it, whose taste will diverge from mine, but I'm trying to imagine what those tastes would be so I can make a general presentation that steers people in the right direction. And so I'm just curious whether you have found that the same is becoming true for you.
Yeah, maybe not quite as honed in as you, but I find that maybe my target is a little bit wider. But I do find that sometimes for a period of weeks, when I'm for whatever break or whatever, my system is sounding amazing. And then I'm I get a piece of equipment to review and I put that in, and it just doesn't do it for me. And that aside, when I come back to my system, it somehow does not sound what it sounded like prior to the product coming in for review.
Yeah.
So that's another thing,
Yes.
right? So, but that's a complication we don't want to go into. So, like you, I strive to give a component that I'm reviewing the fairest go and the best go I can do, and I shuffle things around, I change cables or whatever I need to do to get that to sound as good as it can. But then I'm just wondering whether we're coming back to the sound that we enjoy, and we're kind of manipulating and shaping that component to what we like, to our bias.
Well, we certainly do by the choice of how we change the ancillaries to sort of shift the sound towards sort of our target, right?
Exactly. So then, by that scenario, it's without going crazy, in that scenario, we are kind of trying to shape all the products that we reviewed to one sound, which is what we enjoy. So then it becomes more difficult to actually interpret what that particular product is actually doing, that one product. I don't know. There's that. But if you extend that same concept of enjoying the sound that you enjoy and going outside of that, say, for example, to audio shows where you're listening to dozens and dozens of systems, most of them sounding terrible, but you with a bit of intelligent listening, you listen past all the deficiencies in the room and the fact that people are talking behind you and the fact that you're just sitting off center and all those sorts of things that happen at shows. But I think that in my case anyway, you start in recognizing some of the potential that is in the system that you're listening to at the time in that room at that show. And globally, on an overall picture, it's probably a bad sounding system, but you know that there's potential there. So I guess my target is wider that way. I'm kind of more open-minded in terms of just accepting that certain things aren't going to be to my taste, but I recognise that given the right conditions, and maybe within the context of my system, and again with me reshaping it to my biases, it would be a fantastic product. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answers the question or complicates it. I don't know.
No. The way that I look at it is that going to shows, or in the days where a big city might have had 3 or 4 or 5 different retailers, I think that's a rite of passage. That as a budding audiophile or music lover, that you expose yourself to different flavors, like going to a Baskin Robbins and having 21 flavors of ice cream, and you try every single one of them. Mm-hmm. And that starts to teach you what it is that you like.
Yeah.
That doesn't invalidate the other ones.
Yes.
It just means, and then you also start to realize that, okay, strawberry isn't necessarily my favorite, but there's different levels of strawberry, and I can actually distinguish between them. And I can call this a good strawberry or a mediocre strawberry, and I can say, this is not for me, but it is very good at being a strawberry.
Exactly.
And that's basically how I approach it now. And I find it to be very, very quick, the recognition of what the general flavor of a component is by how it changes the sound of what I have. And it needs to be said that every once in a while we come across an unfortuitous pairing where it's not enough to just replace what we have with the new thing, but we may have to actually change a lot more to give the new thing a fair shape. It just wants something different. And that's, I think, where the reviewers that have done it for a while not only have the experience, but they also have a choice of ancillary gear where they might have 2 or 3 different preamps, and they might have 5 or 6 different amplifiers and cables, et cetera, et cetera. And they can massage things until the end result is a strawberry, and they prefer vanilla, but it's a good strawberry.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've even had cases where I tried all the different ingredients to make the strawberry to my strawberry taste, and I can't make it work, and it's only been once or twice, and there's no matter what I tried with whatever components I had at hand, with whatever cables I had, I just could not make it sound good for me. So I had to approach these manufacturers and say, look, no matter what I do, I'm not enjoying this product, so we need to look at this, So, and without going into the,
do you think, Edgar, that there was anything fundamentally from an engineering point of view wrong with that component, or was it just it was just so far away from your strawberry preference that you like it was chocolate that you just couldn't really review it?
Yeah, there was nothing in those cases that I'm talking about. There was nothing wrong with the equipment. There was no fault.
No.
And yeah. So, I mean,
so you got limitations. We all do, right?
Yeah.
It's
that's right. And the thing is, I tend to review fairly high-end equipment, and with those sorts of products, they're generally well engineered. They're generally well built. Yeah. And designed by people who have been doing for a long time, who are discerning and who are talented, and they can produce great sounding products with reliability and with quality and so on. So it's rare, but it has happened. Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess the reason I was asking Edgar this question is that for those in our audience who are younger and maybe thinking about getting into this line of work, like being involved in the audio HiFi industry on the reviewing side, I don't think anyone today would pursue print. And I even don't think that anyone today would pursue websites like Edgar and I are working on. They would probably go to YouTube.
YouTube.
But I would say that based on my experience and also what you have confirmed, Edgar, is that if you're turning a hobby into a job, it's very likely that the job is going to kill the hobby. And to prevent that takes real management skills.
It does.
And it also, by implication, means that whatever system you have built that you enjoy, it will be in a constant state of uproar. Because for the 2 or 3 days that the system is back to the way you like it, there is the next assignment coming on, and something is going to change.
Yes.
And you have to acknowledge that and be aware of the potential costs to your enjoyment, and also how it will undermine the excitement stemming from ignorance and innocence when you start out. How all of that can affect your ability to just sit down and enjoy music on its own merit, completely divorced from all of these concerns about sonic qualities.
That's a difficult thing. Yeah.
It can be a dream job, but just like any other job, it has shadow sides. And I think if you want to be in it for the long haul, you have to manage those.
You have to manage it. Yeah. I mean, aside from the fact that it's hard work, you're lifting things that are generally heavy, right? No. So you're lifting things that are heavy. You're taking, you're moving your speakers away out of the room. Sorry?
So soft. Oh, the equipment's heavy.
Right, yes, sorry. So you're doing that. You're taking your speakers away. You're putting in new speakers. I've done my back. So it's hard work. And I find the writing process, as much as I enjoy it, I actually find it hard work because I tend to rewrite a lot. I don't write a review. I rewrite it, right? And rewrite it several times and keep changing things. And at the end, I'm not even happy sometimes, and so it's hard work. But aside from that, I've trained myself to turn off the analytical side, and I've made this plan that I do this at least once or twice a week, generally on the weekends, where I have a couple of long listening sessions where I just play the music that I enjoy without examining what the system's doing. Just cranking it, something that I find engaging, that I really enjoy, and that sometimes gives me goosebumps. And that's what I try to do as much as possible. Yeah.
In other words, you have learned how to take off the reviewer's cap. It's not glued on indefinitely.
Exactly. That's right. It doesn't stay off. It doesn't stay off for too long. It comes back on. But I have to do that. Otherwise, it just spoils the enjoyment of music for you. If you're starting to listen to listen to sounds rather than to listen to music, So
indeed, that's completely understandable, Edgar. And on your Srajan, on your you mentioned potentially people who might want to go down the path of being a reviewer, and you were talking about multiple flavours of ice cream. I think before you start reviewing, you might want to try all the flavours and be somewhat not just familiar with the different flavours, but the different qualities of those different flavours before you. Otherwise, potentially, surely you're either maybe not in a position to pass judgment on something. Although I'm kind of asking this to you, Srajan, as a question. Are they in a position to pass judgment on, vanilla ice cream in all its qualities, as well as all the other flavours, having started eating ice cream only recently? What do you think?
A couple of points to your question. One is, as far as I'm concerned, all of us audio reviewers are completely and utterly self-made. There's no school, no test to take, no governing body, no certificate or diploma to achieve to becoming an audio reviewer. Some reviewers get to audio reviewing and they are a credentialed writer. They might be published, they might have written crime novels or scientific journals. Others come to reviewing with maybe a retail background or even an engineering background. So they have some association, but to become a reviewer and to judge equipment, I think all of us are self-made. So that needs to be understood, number one. Number two, all of us learn while we are on the job, which means that on day one, when we're writing our first review, we are review virgins. Maybe we have submitted a review to a publication, if it's not our own, and they have said, yeah, fine, good, go ahead. But now we're basically learning on the job, which by implication means that our first review came with a whole lot less experience and most likely sophistication and maturity than 5 years down the road when we have done 4 reviews a month, right? So that needs to be understood. And I also think it's very important for the audience of audio reviews, be they on YouTube or in print or online, to have knowledge of the reviewer's audiophile background. So I think there has to be a CV of the reviewer somewhere that explains what they have done before. In my case, I've been a musician, I've been in audio retail, and I've also worked in sales and marketing for 3 different HiFi companies. So I've sort of seen the industry from a lot of different angles. That's certainly not the only way to do it. But I think that my audience deserves to know what I bring to the table.
Agreed.
Now, to your question, are we qualified? What does qualify somebody to be a reviewer? I think the most important qualification above all others is enthusiasm. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe that reviews are primarily or at all about purchasing decisions. I think they're about entertainment. I think they're because people that are interested in this hobby want to be somehow associated with the tribal, with the community, and they want to be on the up and up about what's new.
Sure.
Now, for every purchase decision that they make, they will read 100 other reviews that have nothing to do with figuring out what to buy next. So I think entertainment is a big aspect. And the second one should be education. It should be entertaining, but you should also learn something. And to be entertaining, I think the most important qualification is enthusiasm. I'd much rather read a lesser writer with enthusiasm than an expert who is going through the motion because he's been doing it for so long. It's just like he's bored.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that kind of boredom and dryness and working from an abstract ivory tower perspective, I think that doesn't do anything to promote the hobby. Why would you want to become a member of this hobby if the ones that are presenting it to you don't interest you? You find them boring. You see a picture of their room, you find that room boring. It's nothing that you could possibly see yourself live in. I mean, all the signs are sort of negatory. So I think that's very important, is to have enthusiasm. But obviously, experience matters as well. And I think in the olden days, we had sort of guardrails and we had watchdogs with the print publications. And there was sort of a corridor that you had to walk through where people would edit you. They would sort of guide you. They would mentor you. Certain reviews they wouldn't publish. They would shoot them right back at you and says, you have to redo that. That's technically wrong, or I don't agree with that conclusion. You got to fix that. I can't publish it the way that it is. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, a lot of us are self-published. So we can still publish that thing that we really shouldn't have published, except we weren't mature enough to edit ourselves correctly.
Yeah,
we still have a watchdog, though. I think it's a different type of watchdog now, and it's basically social media and the forums. That's who. They're the types of people that are pulling us up the way that the old editor used to do, but they don't say rewrite this. They basically start an endless thread of negativity and so that's kind of what keeps you. I actually sometimes when I write a review and I'm struggling with certain points about what I want to say about a product that might be challenging, sometimes there's a trigger that says, hey, I need to think about what people are going to think about this, because I need to be right about this. I need to really fact check, because if I'm wrong in this, I'm going to get pulled up. So yeah, I think that's a different type of watchdog that we're experiencing now in social media and the forums.
Yeah, but there's a flip side to it as well. And I think that flip side is that if you're a YouTube reviewer and your income and your popularity is directly related to the algorithm's tracking of how many people not only read your reviews, but actually go all the way to the end of a 45-minute YouTube video or a 15-minute YouTube, and don't click off after 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have the comment section on, and you now pick your coverage, what you review and how you review it, based on wanting positive reactions and being deathly afraid of too many negative reactions because they will kill your business. I think that becomes a real handicap, because now you're basically kowtowing to your audience. And rather than educating your audience and maybe taking them into unfamiliar territory, you keep just regurgitating the things that they're familiar with and give you a thumbs up about.
Yes.
And you sort of sidestep all the issues that could be contentious.
Controversial, yeah. I totally agree. And what I meant, I wasn't saying they're shaping what I want to say, but I need to fact check. So I need the accuracy needs to be there, because they'll pull you up on it. So yeah. It's a strange world, and who knows how algorithms work? It's crazy. There's no rhyme or reason about them. I mean, I'm active in social media and on Instagram particularly, and I can do 3 or 4 posts that, as far as I can see, have the same elements, the same ingredients in there for success, and one can be, shoot to the stars and get hundreds of thousands of views, and others get only a few thousand. And why? Because they're almost, in some ways, they're almost identical. It's just the product is different, or it's unpredictable.
Well, that's the algorithm, isn't it? I mean, it picks up on. Hey, I'm not an algorithm creator, but obviously it's all sorts of little things that are very hard to, like little subtleties, I guess, of the product, the way you pulled it out of the box, the way you knifed the flaps open, so to speak, and presented it to the audience. I mean, we're not talking about unboxing videos. I mean, why does anyone watch that? I mean, to check the quality of the packaging, which we presume most packaging does the job, but I mean, it's very strange. Hey, gentlemen, we're going to have to go part 2 on this, because there's many things that I feel like Srajan has got secret agenda that he's not he's not fully coming out with like sort of a whole bunch of very big subjects, which you feel like I feel like Srajan you wish to cover, and but we're not going to get through them today. I guess we have to do this all over again sometime soon.
I'd love to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to. I think it'd be great. Yeah. We'll speak about what that can be. We've covered a hell of a lot today. Thank you for your time, Srajan of 6 Moons. Check out the website. And, of course, Edgar of SoundStage. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Andrew.
you.